worthy, you're worthy. Get up.
Welcome back, guys. Chuck Nasty on Fantasy Football here, and today we're going over the off-season impacts on the AFC South as it affects your fantasy team. As always, if you guys haven't rung the bell to subscribe to the channel below to get notified when I release a new video, make sure you do that. We're going to be releasing a ton of fantasy content every single week this year to help you guys win your fantasy football leagues. Going into the AFC South. So first we're going to start with the Houston Texans. This one is pretty easy. I mean, they have DeAndre Hopkins, who is a no-brainer wide receiver one, who might be the best wide receiver in the National Football League. As it relates to PPR formats, he is a god. Standard formats, he is a god. All hail the mighty DeAndre Hopkins. In the best part about this, and you know, Nuke or Hopkins, whatever you want to call him, is that Deshaun Watson only seems like he's getting better. And I don't really think that we've seen the ceiling that Deshaun Watson has to offer. So I'm really excited that there's a potential that Deshaun Watson ends up as a top 5 QB this year. And if he pops off and, you know, him and Hopkins kind of go hand in hand, it's going to be a very, very good year for whoever has drafted DeAndre Hopkins. Other than that, the running back game is a little bit more sketchy. If you guys watched the preseason game, Lamar Miller played in a game, had a very, very questionable I don't understand why he was playing in the game to begin with. I mean, it was clear that he was the starter. You should probably have given somebody else the chance, but they played him in the game. He went down, took a helmet, had a really, really ugly contact with the back of his knee, and tore his ACL. It probably ended his career. I mean, the guy's old enough to where I don't think that he's going to be able to rehab that and come back as a productive individual in the NFL. I could be wrong, but I think that his career is probably over. But the good news is they had just recently traded for Duke Johnson. And Duke Johnson has always, I felt like, had the potential to be a 3-down back. He has the receiving skill set. He's got a big enough body. He's, you know, elusive. And we're going to find out whether or not he can handle the workload because as far as, you know, Houston beat writers, they have said that he is going to get all of the work that he can handle. So I expect that they're probably going to go out and sign maybe another veteran or have somebody else kind of show up to help him with the workload there. But I'm really interested in how he is currently going, where his draft stock is. Right now, he is the 26th running back off the board, 63rd overall in PPR formats. So that's putting him in the early 6th round. And there's a huge potential value that he just does really, really well this year. And the Texans actually end up winning the AFC South, which means they're going to run the ball more. If they're winning a ton more of these games, they're going to want to control the clock. They're going to want to run down the clock, and they'll do that by using Duke Johnson. You look at their receiving corps splits. Now, this is kind of interesting because they have a couple of these guys like Will Fuller and Kiki Kuti who are total polar opposites. Will Fuller is this boomer bust, high upside guy, but has trouble staying healthy. And then you have Kiki Kuti, who is the target, you know, middle of the field kind of guy. I want to share some splits with you of what their receiving corps look like. So in 3 games that Will Fuller played without Kiki Kuti, he had 6 catches, 113 yards, and 1 touchdown on 8.7 targets as an average. That's insane. Anytime Kiki's on the bench, apparently you want to play Will Fuller. But when Kiki is in the lineup, in 4 games that Will Fuller played with Kiki Kuti in the lineup, he averaged 3.5 catches for 41 yards and 0.25 touchdowns on 4.8 targets. So his work has significantly decreased when Kiki is on the field. So, note to self, whenever Kiki's playing, you don't really want to play Will Fuller. Okay. But on the flip side of that, Kiki, when he's playing in games with Will Fuller, he averages 5.3 catches for 49 yards and 0.25 touchdowns on 7.5 targets. But when he's not playing without Fuller in the lineup, he averages 3.5 catches, for 46 yards and 0 touchdowns on 5.5 targets. So it's almost like when Fuller's in the lineup, you want to play Kiki. And when Kiki's not in the lineup, you want to play Fuller. So it's just kind of an interesting stat that I noted, but just, you know, for your info, info to you when you are constructing your roster as, a mix of high upside guys or safe volume plays. Moving on to the we just did the Houston Texans. Moving on to the Indianapolis Colts. Man, if you guys weren't shocked by the Andrew Luck retirement news, I don't know what's going to shock you this year. But I was a huge proponent for T.Y. I'm going to put some Super Bowl futures down in Vegas next Wednesday, and the Colts were going to be one of them. I was super hyped about getting T.Y. in the third round as one of my targets, and I'm pretty upset about it. But that's just my luck. So in games with luck, T.Y. had 1,270 yards and 6 touchdowns. He was the 15th wide receiver, which puts him right in that third round draft range. Now, with Jacoby Brissett in there, he ends up losing about 50 to 60 points on the season, puts him close to that wide receiver 25. I don't even know if I can draft him anymore based on where his stock is. If he falls into that wide receiver 25 to 30 range, I might consider it. Just know what I'm getting at that point and maybe get a good value in that particular round. But you can't look at him in the same. He would have been considered, a borderline wide receiver 1 or 2, depending on the format. And, you're just not going to get that same production now. And then you have the splits of the tight ends. So you have Eric Ebron in 5 games with Jack Doyle, averaged 3.6 catches for 46 yards and 1.4 touchdowns on 4.4 targets. But in 10 games without Doyle, he averaged 4.8 catches for 52 yards and 0.6 touchdowns on 8.8 targets. This is one of the more strange splits that I've seen, because apparently when Doyle plays in the game, Ebron gets half the targets, but he gets all the touchdowns. So, in the red zone, he's the first look, even if Doyle's playing. But in the games when Doyle is not playing, he gets double the amount of targets. He gets a little bit more yards and an extra couple catches, but has half the touchdown production. I'm not really sure what to make of this. Personally, I'm drafting one of the top 6 tight ends. I'm not getting into the range where I need Ebron or Doyle at all. They added Devin Funchess in the offseason from Carolina, who's a big red zone target. That could pinch Ebron's red zone targets even more than it is already. They drafted Paris Campbell as a new rookie, and then they still have Marlon Mack that is there. I was super high on Marlon Mack. I'm keeping him in one of my leagues in like the 11th round, and I was really hyped to see what he does with Andrew Luck this year, but his value obviously goes down as well since they're not as confident in Jacoby Brissett as a quarterback. Moving on to the Tennessee Titans. This is kind of I have a personal stake in this team because a good friend of mine, Ben, is a massive Tennessee Titans fan and has every excuse in the book as to why they're actually still a good, decent team. Now, in a lot of cases, they've made decent runs. Last year, they made a decent playoff push. But I don't think that has anything to do with the fact that Marcus Mariota has not been good. So you look, and there's a couple of things that maybe help that argument that Mariota hasn't had a great time over his first couple years, and that's because he's primarily had a new coordinator each year. They added some new weapons. They added Adam Humphries, who they loved using in the preseason games. They signed A.J. Brown. But you look at Marcus Mariota's touchdown splits, and in the first 27 games of his career, he threw 45 touchdowns. That's pretty solid. But then in the last 29 games, he's thrown 24 touchdowns. So he's kind of a fantasy option to be able to score with his legs, but it seems like he's been a big, big letdown. I just don't know if he's even worth drafting at this point. He's currently being drafted outside of the top 24 quarterbacks. The only reason why you would draft him is maybe in a 2-quarterback league or as a third or maybe a potential streamer, but he's really not worth being drafted in a lot of these leagues. And then you get to the running back situation. Everybody's drafting Derrick Henry in the 3rd round, and I don't understand why. If you looked at his stats last year, and there's a ton of people that just have problems remembering past an event that happened, it's called recency bias. So of this recency bias, people remember him absolutely destroying the Jacksonville Jaguars and running for 245 yards in a single game. That's just stuck in their mind. But what I remember is that he was sitting on the waiver before those 3 games where he had a great season. And I can't draft him. I went back and I looked at his stats. Of his 1,000 yards that he rushed for last year, 55% of his total season yardage came in his last 4 games. I don't want somebody in a 14-game season to only score a decent chunk of points in 4 games. I'm not buying him in the 3rd round. There are other values that I would rather have there, the Josh Jacobs of the world, the guys that we don't know what they're going to be doing. Derrick Henry is a very difficult guy to stop when he gets running. I mean, the guy's like 250 pounds. I understand that you can't tackle him, but if you don't let him out of the backfield, I just don't think that he's going to be a productive contributor to most fantasy football rosters this year. I'm not drafting him. There are other people that I would rather have at that spot. I think the only value in this offense is Dion Lewis as a late-round sleeper. I mean, if you end up without a tight end and you really need somebody, you have Delaney Walker that's available late. Corey Davis had more target share than pretty much anybody else last year, but he didn't really do anything with it. You can still draft him pretty safely in the 6th, 7th, 8th rounds, and he's not really going to hurt your team. I'm just not confident with anybody that is a part of an offense is being led by Marcus Mariota. The dynamic might change if Ryan Tannehill takes over midway through the season, but the people that I like in this offense is more of like a Dion Lewis as a late-round sleeper in a PPR league, just to really hope that something happens to Derrick Henry and then that he gets a bigger part of that offense. Moving on to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Offseason changes. Nick Foles came over in the offseason. He lost pretty much all of the weapons that he had in Philadelphia, but a huge positive is that him and Dede Westbrook have this almost immediate connection. You've seen it in a couple of the preseason games where Dede sees 7 or 8 or 9 targets. I love drafting Dede Westbrook in that 7th round. Currently, Dede is going off the board as the wide receiver 33 with the 83rd pick in most drafts. In PPR formats, depending on what your roster construction is, and for those of you that don't know what I mean by that, I mean the mix of volume or safe receivers as opposed to the upside boom or bust guys that you're trying to draft to make sure that you're putting up a consistently high score every single week. Dede is one of those safe guys. In the 7th round or even in the 8th round, if you get him at the 83rd pick, he's going to get a ton of targets this year. In PPR formats, that's going to put his floor way above most other guys at that position. You can pair him with a very, very high upside guy, like say you draft Odell Beckham Jr. early. There may be some games where ODB doesn't have super high numbers, but as something where he's somewhat decent, maybe he gets 60, 75 yards on 5 catches or something. Dede's going to be hanging out over there, 10 receptions for 75 to 100 yards, helping maintain the balance on your roster. So definitely somebody to keep an eye on at this point. The other receivers that are there, I mean, you have Chris Conley, Marquise Lee's coming back from injury. It's just really difficult to tell where the targets are all going to go outside of Dede Westbrook. I think that he's probably one of those guys that has the majority of the target share there. And then you have a pass-catching running back in Leonard Fournette, and you've got Alfred Blue behind him in the backfield who came over from the Texans, and then you have Raquel Armstead behind him who may try to vie for a spot with kind of like a 3rd down pass option as well. Tough to say, but mainly the only piece that I want of the Jacksonville Jaguars offense is going to be Dede Westbrook, and I think that the reason for that is that Nick Foles' value is going to go up as John DeFilippo, the ex-Vikings offensive coordinator that was fired for passing the ball too much, is now his offensive coordinator. So I'm going to see pretty much an immediate uptick in points for Dede. Drafting a ton of him in that 7th, 8th round. I hope you do too. That's pretty much all I've got for this division today in the AFC South. I'm going to be doing another video on the AFC West after this, the impact of the Chiefs, Raiders, Chargers, and my so dear Denver Broncos. If you guys aren't already subscribed and want to get more notifications on anytime I upload a video to help you win your league, make sure that you hit the bell, subscribe to the channel below. Drop a comment as well. If there's anything I can do to help you with a draft or any questions on which player should I take at certain spots, I'm more than happy to help, and I'll be responding to a lot of questions over the next week or so. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Stay here. I'll be back.